we had our first kind of like viral video, the Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes pitch. Now, is that something, like, was that on your radar at all before
I didn't know it existed in any form.
That Alan Moore Twilight of the Superheroes pitch is the first thing that I ever printed up when I got got access to the internet.
What?
It was like, you know, it's like, okay, I need a copy of it. Like,
that's amazing.
You know, yeah, it was like very like early days of the internet. It was probably like 1995 or something that I like, you know, learned about, because it's like you go on the internet and then it's like, what's out there, you know, and so I saw that, printed it up,
That's sick.
It's like way into it, and like I thought like I need to draw this. Like it was kind of like a project I had way back then, where I was like, oh, because it was, you know, before I kind of, you know, became like a writer, you know, like I was kind of like, I just wanted to do the art. I felt like I needed somebody else to make the, so I thought like, I'll take this Alan Moore pitch and I'll draw it. So I did kind of like, you know, I did some drawings in here, some color stuff, some stuff in crayon and stuff, and like, of like Superman getting in like the big fight with everybody. But, you know, and then kind of, you know, put it aside and like moved on to other stuff. But so making that video was kind of like a culmination. It's kind of like my entire like relationship with the internet. It kind of closes the loop. It was like the first thing I ever really connected with on the internet, and then now it's...
When you were making that video, did you... was that the first time you had drawn, like, when thinking about the story, like the... Like,
it was the first time I'd drawn those characters since, you know, the 90s. I just have all this like experience now. So like in the 90s when I drew Superman, he looked like a bulked up Superman. He looked like Batman in The Dark Knight Returns except Superman. He didn't look like Superman in The Dark Knight Returns. He looked like Batman in The Dark Knight Returns but Superman. So he's just this like big, wide, square Superman, you know, and all like, you know, cut up and whatever. But he was still just wearing his normal like Superman outfit and stuff. But then when I was doing this one, it kind of like that image came to me of like Superman as kind of like a King Arthur, and he's got the Kryptonian headband and the beard. And
Love
stuff. Like,
the beard.
That was all like, it was all just sort of coming out in just in the process of doing it. It's something I've been wanting to talk about on the show with you, and then like I think there was like a commenter who kind of suggested it after like one of our videos and stuff. But like I was kind of holding off talking about it because I thought I still have that print up, and that would be such a cool prop to like pull out of like the print up.
See it.
And like
oh my God.
I haven't like I have it, you know, in with my stuff.
Yeah.
Like I just, you know, I haven't done like all the digging to find it, but it's in there, and so whenever I do find it, I'll bring it up
here.
But like I just thought I want to wait until I have that cool prop to bring out to do. So then I thought like, you know what I could do? Oh, I could like act it out, like be Alan Moore. You know, doing it, but and then I thought like, of course, like animation, and we had talked about doing like possible like animated things for Total Recall.
This opened the floodgates.
Yeah, it was like a ton of work, but it was a lot of fun and worth it. And so like I want to do like another, you know, do something like make this into kind of a regular feature. It's just like the right materials got across.
Tom, you should do the audiobook of Jack. If there's a way to like. I don't know if you can like sync up some kind of like I know.
Oh, like a Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics audiobook.
Yeah, like you have your images, but like if there's a way to sync up like
right, do like a slideshow or whatever. Like like do like like bring
for someone to buy it like that.
Right. Well,
you should read your because it's great work on the.
Neil Gaiman's kind of like he's broken open that door because now, thanks to Neil Gaiman, there are audio comics. Like there's an audio Sandman where it's like like an audiobook version of his comics. That was like a thing I thought like. In fact, I was like talking to somebody just like I think I was talking to like I was texting with like Chris Pitzer from Ad House who published American Barbarian.
Yeah.
I think I was texting with him a few weeks ago, and like we're just talking about this and that, and then I kind of mentioned like I'm surprised nobody's ever done like a fan comic of Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes, because there's all these like Kickstarters and stuff of like, you know, people just getting together and doing these like, you know, crazy fan projects. And I'm like just shocked nobody's done that before. And so like of
course
I, you know, like it was sitting there staring me in the
balls.
Yeah, right in the face. And that was something that was kind of widely circulated on the internet, and a lot of comics creators, you know, in the 90s and whatever, like read that and then kind of strip mined it.
I was gonna say did like elements of that ever make their way into other...
In all kinds of stuff, like...
Because it beat it beat I mean that
Right. Yeah. Well, because he was doing like a Game of Thrones style, like a feudal houses kind of thing. Now, when this thing came out, it was like before the Game of Thrones. Or George R. R. Martin's like a huge comics fan. George R. Like that would make sense because sort of like 94, 95, 96 is kind of when it was like in heavy circulation. So that's interesting that he would. But I mean, the whole feudal houses at war is kind of like a classic thing.
Yeah.
And you would see it in like BattleTech, which is when he's talking about making a game out of it. You'd see it in like BattleTech. But like, to me, like when I first read that thing, the reference I was thinking of was Dune. That video, like I trimmed it way down because like if I had done the full pitch, it was over an hour already. It would have been like over 2 hours, the whole thing, and like so I had to make some cuts, but like most of the cuts were in his sort of like introductory part. So like I tried to keep as much of like the story part intact as possible, but the so most of the cuts were to that introductory part. So like the introductory part is like super interesting because it's all like he's talking to Paul Levitz and Jeanette Kahn. Like when you're Alan Moore, like he had, made a lot of like big bucks for DC. So like he doesn't have to like pitch this to like, his assistant editor or his editor or the assistant editor or whatever. He's pitching it directly to the bosses, to like the executives.
The big top brass.
Yeah, so he's pitching it and he's like basically explains all the things he wants to accomplish with it and where he's seen sort of similar things go wrong in the past. And like all that stuff's super interesting. It's just like I kind of wanted to get to the story, and as quickly as I could. So I kind of kept that stuff to a minimum. He was talking about those crossovers and he's like, you have these crossovers and it's got sort of the main story where it would be like, Secret Wars would be like 12 issues or whatever. And then you have like the crossovers where it's like in, this month's issue of Spider-Man, you see Spider-Man go off and to the planet of Secret Wars and stuff, and then in the Captain America issue, you see Captain America go, and then you see Captain America in the next issue come back from Secret Wars and this and that. So he was saying like, with those kind of crossovers, usually it's like you got the guy who's doing the team that's doing the crossover, and then everybody else at the company kind of resents it because it's like, oh shit, like I had this whole cool story going in my Superman thing. And now I gotta sidetrack it because I gotta make a story that like feeds into this idiot's story or whatever. So and he said some people toe the line and they're like, okay, I'll do it, and then some people do it reluctantly and stuff. So he said, here's a way to have it organically built into it where it's like you have these people who are trying to get this message from the future, mainly John Constantine, but like a couple other people who are trying to visit all the various superheroes in their individual books.
Yeah.
And he said, the way it's structured, if somebody doesn't want to participate, they don't have to. And then in the main book, we just sort of have John Constantine say, oh, I tried to contact the Green Lantern, but I couldn't do it. And then if you want to participate, you can, So it's like, it's up to the edit. Like they can participate to whatever degree they want. And it still ends up working it for the story because it's like, oh shit,
But you're right. I see it as kind of like battle bones, and you can hook things into the battle bones if you want to, or you don't like.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so then it just becomes organically part of the story. I don't know if he had completed Watchmen yet, or Watchmen was like close to completion or whatever, but it was a hit. He was riding high on it, and like they were doing like Watchmen games and stuff, and and he had profit participation in all of it. And like Alan Moore, even like there was like a Watchmen role playing game, and he even like wrote some of the modules to go with. Like he wrote like original stories for it and stuff. So he was all in, and he's like, here's something we can make a game out of. You have all these like kingdoms. You have like the Superman kingdom, the this, and everybody can. And he said you can make a video game out of it. And like the other thing he was saying is that a lot of these crossover things just feel kind of pointless. It's like what did we accomplish with it? Like, and he said what he felt is that people talk about superheroes being the modern mythology, and he said it's kind of not true. Like mythology and legends and stuff have something that comic book superheroes don't have. They have an ending. And, like we know how, how Robin Hood dies. We know how, King Arthur dies. We know how all these, and like, we don't know that for the superheroes. And he said, like, reading Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, he's like, oh, now the Batman story has an ending. Like, it has an ending to it. And also because it takes place in a projected future, you can kind of read it and be like, hey, maybe this is how it turns out, maybe it's not. But like anytime Batman does something in the modern day comics that seems like it's inching him closer to that thing, the reader's kind of like, ooh, you know. And so then eventually, this happens later, like after Alan Moore wrote this thing, but eventually, like in Dark Knight Returns, it's like Jason Todd, the current Robin, is dead in there, and so like eventually, like they kill, you know, Jason Todd in you know, with a 1-900 number thing in the modern comics. So like he said, he wants to do that for the whole DC line, and he feels like if you have this like ending story for the whole DC Comics superhero thing, it kind of makes it into this satisfying whole, into this like meaning that it's not this arbitrary list of comic books that have just kind of been crammed together, you know, just through, you know, just the vagaries of the publishing business, but that it's actually this organic whole, and there's a cause and effect, and it's all leading somewhere, and it's leading to this, like, you know, Twilight of the Gods, this kind of Gotterdammerung, this Super Dämmerung, this you know, Ragnarok of the superheroes. And he said, like, it's not set in stone either, because it's a future story. Like, it's like we have a capstone to the entire, like, and he talks about it possibly even being the capstone to the entire, like, superhero enterprise as a whole, not just DC Comics, which is why he sort of brings in the Shadow and Tarzan. And
I love that. I love the team of Batman, Shadow, Tarzan, Doc.
The four elementals. It's interesting because this thing got rejected, or it didn't get rejected. Alan Moore had his falling out with DC before this thing could even get like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So it was just not going to happen in any. You know.
What happened with?
From what I understand, Alan Moore did Watchmen, and in the contract, like the wording of the contract was such that like whenever they stop printing it, you know, like a year later or 2 years later, the rights revert back to him. So some version of that, not exactly that, but something where. And he said that DC just decided to never stop printing it. They've kept it in print consistently since 1986. You know, partly because of the success of it, but also because then they never have to revert the rights. They keep the rights forever. And he said like that was, you know, sort of in bad faith, because the wording of the contract, like the intent of the contract was that they're going to do a run of this, they're going to make a bunch of money, and then he's going to get it back.
That's why he signed it.
Yeah, exactly. But like that, he felt like they found sort of like a loophole for it, and he said like the general practice in comics, like that never happened. The thing of like something being in print forever, just did not happen. So like it never even occurred to him. He was out of there. Because,
you didn't think that your thing that you're making is going to be the thing that never goes out of print.
Yeah, like he would have just worded it differently if he had known that they were gonna like just, you know, do that loophole. He would have been like, oh, you know, 6 months from blah 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 is when it, you know, lapses. So we comic creators have all learned a lesson from that. You know, that like we learned from these bad things that our predecessors had to go through. Also, the sort of time travel aspect of it being sort of a future, and like messages coming from the future to the past. And then the way it resolves with like John Constantine kind of throwing a spanner in the works of like the plan that the older Constantine came up with.
He's like tricked by my.
so you have this like end of the world kind of story for the superheroes, but the ending is such that like it could all go poof. You know, obviously things aren't going to unfold that exact way. You know, so like maybe none of this ever happens, but there's enough of a story there that like. Maybe it will, you know. Yeah. So you kind of have your cake and eat it too. So he's just coming at it from all those angles.
I was excited when there was a time travel element, or like
there's the one character, Tommy Tomorrow, who John Constantine in the future gives a message to, and then sends him back to the past.
Yeah.
So that's the time travel. I think this is some of the stuff that got edited out. Man, it was a marathon. Like doing that Alan Moore imitation for like over an hour. Like, you know, it was a marathon. It was like it's, you know, like, you know, staying in character.
I was gonna say like when I was listening for like when he did Thor's Day, you still had remnants of the
rest of the day after like I finished that recording session. I was kind of like getting into my Alan Moore voice just around the house and stuff, you know.
I was like, am I hearing your Alan Moore?
Yeah, he's got such a great voice and a great cadence and like this sort of like sing-songy kind of, but very low, kind of like Treebeard of the Ents.
Love it.
You know, and like you could just like listen to him forever. So I was trying to capture some of that. You know,
great
especially
voice work.
Oh, thanks. Like since it was sort of an animated thing, like it kind of like to me wouldn't make sense if I was just kind of reading. Like if I were just reading it off a piece of paper, you know, like talking to you or something, a different story. But since I have a little animated Alan Moore there,
it was nice seeing like great Alan Moore artwork.
Thanks. It was fun to draw because I was trying to draw like Alan Moore in 1986. So he's got his like Watchmen shirt on. His hair and beard are dark. You know, there's not a touch of gray in there.
And I loved the images you would do for like the different houses, like like
the House of Steel and stuff, you know, where it's like a silk. Yeah, again, like I'm just kind of coming up with those like in the moment.
And it was cool seeing when you were setting up like the setups on there, like how you were staggering like the characters.
Somebody was mentioning in the comments, I think, about the that like in the comics, Billy Batson and Mary Marvel are brother and sister. They're like they were both orphans. They didn't know each other until, you know, they both became superheroes, and then they like, you know, they got to know each other in that comic. But like, so they're married in, you know, and so and you know, part of that is kind of like just sort of like the feudal thing of like marriage, like sort of incestuous marriages to kind of consolidate power and stuff like that. But also like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, like their big like hero is there was this novel called Super Folks, and the author's, his last name was Mayer. I forget his first name. I think he wrote this novel called Super Folks, where it's like all those tropes that you see in Miracle Man, in Alan Moore's superhero work, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and in Grant Morrison's superhero work. It's like all these tropes that you see, and one of the things in it is you know, Mary Marvel and Captain Marvel having like an incestuous relationship. So I feel like that's like a reference to that, you know. But he doesn't spell that out in his pitch. Like I think he's kind of hoping that like Paul Levitz and Jeanette Kahn forgot that, because I think he wants to kind of slip, because he does have a history of like trying to slip things past the censors. Like one of his characters is called Sodom Yacht, and the whole point of that name was to slip the word sodomy into a DC comic, into a Green Lantern comic. So
did it make it through to
it did. I think it got changed to Sodal Yacht, maybe, or maybe it made it all the way through. I forget.
There was I was intrigued by the Gorilla
Grodd, yeah. Gorilla Grodd. Oh, and also because Gorilla Grodd's just kind of a minor character. He's in the House of Secrets with the Justice League. I mean the Legion of Doom. But yeah, it was Kongorilla.
Kongorilla, and he how did he get swap bodies?
Well, that's the thing. Like a lot of these characters, I had context for. Like I knew them. Like I don't think I ever read a Kongorilla comic, but like when I was a kid, I'd read the DC Who's Who. Yeah. So like I read the entry for Kongorilla, and so it was like it started out as like a jungle adventure comic where it was this character called Congo Bill. And he would it was, you know, had to have these sort of like Tarzan style adventures. He was kind of had like the pith helmet and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He'd have these adventures, and it was that kind of comic at DC. And then at a certain point, they turned it into like a superhero comic where he finds this magic ring, and when he rubs it, he switches bodies with this like magical golden gorilla, and so he becomes Kongorilla. The thing of like he decides he's just, you know, he starts getting older, and he decides, I'm just going to be Kongorilla full time. And because he switches brains, you know, magically with the gorilla, so he's just gonna let the gorilla's brain stay in his like old man body, and he's gonna,
you know, it was like the guy, he said, I was cracking up because it said he fed him garbage.
Yeah, it was like it's, you know, Alan Moore, like
I don't know why that was cracking my ass.
Alan Moore says like when he wrote Watchmen, like he kind of feel like, I mean, he said when he wrote Watchmen, he was in a really bad mood. Like, he was in a really bad mood that lasted maybe a year or so when he did Watchmen. And I feel like this was part of that, too. He was, like, again, I think it's delightful. Like, like, you know, I'm all in I want to see this comic. I wanted to see that. Like the impetus of this was to
Yeah.
kind of get to see a version of this story. Like I'm all in, but like I get it is coming from a pretty like nasty, but also like they're coming from, you know, that sort of British invasion in comics in the 80s. They're all coming from 2000 AD, and 2000 AD was like a very funny, very like nasty, kind of mean-spirited comic that was like a lot of fun, but definitely had like a wicked sense of humor. And so he's kind of bringing that, and of course, like he doesn't spell it out exactly, but you know how that story is going to resolve, where he's just waiting for this gorilla, like this gorilla in an old man body that is his own body, you know, kind of like picture of Dorian Gray or something, you know. He's just waiting for that thing to die, and he's treating it like shit. And you know there's going to be a scene where somehow he like accidentally rubs that ring and then switches places, and then, you know, a gorilla's back in his body and just like smashes him to bits, you know.
It was cracking me up when like he's like when he comes home. He's the guy just like snarls at him.
Glares at
him.
like, man.
I'm like,
you know.
Holy shit. He's like, he locks him in the bedroom and feeds him garbage.
Like, the other thing in it was like...
Well, I can relate.
Yeah, yeah, you can relate to that rotting carcass of the old man, you know.
I'm like, it's my favorite character.
Well, you know, it's you know, kind of a critique of escapism too, and maybe like the graying or the aging of like comics fans too, as they're like kind of getting closer to 40 or whatever. You know, you know, he felt like, okay, there's probably like way too much time travel going on in the DC universe, and he felt like, you know, there's all those like alternate universes that kind of got like destroyed in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and he said like so many of those universes are so like wonderful and great and such like an important part of like DC's, you know, cosmology, that to just kind of like you make them non-existent kind of, you know, is kind of a shame. But he said like, so he sort of had this idea where he could set up that like the Time Trapper or somebody sets up this like fluke, this like field that surrounds like this point of time, this like body of time within the multiverse, the DC multiverse, where like you can't travel to or from this period of time.
Okay.
So like any time travelers who are within this span of time, say from like the year, you know, 1995, which would have been like a future year, 1995 to like 2022 or something. Like time travelers can't travel in or out of that time. So if you're a time traveler, you can travel like to after that, you can travel before that, but you can't travel in there. And if you are a time traveler who happens to be inside that period of time, you're stuck where you are.
Oh my God.
You're stuck where you are until, you know, 2022 or whatever
Holy
the year
shit.
is. And so that was one of the houses, was the House of Tomorrow, where it's like every time traveler who just happened to be within that thing when the seal came on, that's where they are. Like that's where they congregate stuck. And they're kind of stuck, and they're just kind of trying to figure out a way out. And so he describes how like there's various versions of all these different time traveling characters, mainly the Legion of Superheroes, because like time travel was a big part of the Legion of Superheroes. There'd be Legion of Superhero members at various ages. So there'd be like, you know, the teenage version from like the 1960s comics, and then there'd be like older version in like their 20s from like the modern Legion of Superhero comics that were coming out in the 80s. But then you'd also have like old man versions. So there'd be like, you know, a bunch of different versions of, you know, Cosmic Boy or some, you know.
That's cool as hell.
Yeah, all living together, all like getting on each other's nerves, having kind of like cabin fever, you know, as they're trying to like stay cool and do as little damage to the time-space continuum as possible. So that kind of stuff was pretty cool.
I am intrigued by it was the villains that are in Colorado.
Yeah, right. The Legion of Doom has kind of,
And like thought it would be intriguing. I don't know if it's been done to see like the Joker in like a cabin up in the mountains. Like
I don't know if you noticed, like in my drawing of the House of Secrets, I drew the Joker with a green mustache.
I saw it. I saw that.
Yeah.
I was like, I like that.
Yeah. Again, some of this stuff just kind of came to me in the making.
It was
a reference to Cesar Romero.
I was like,
although
the
his
makeup
mustache, his mustache was never green.
The Shadow, Batman, Tarzan, and
Doc Savage.
They were like, I can't remember in the plot.
They were called like the Council of Immortals or something. Like they're like they're like the pulp, because like again, a lot of the bits and pieces of this comic, in addition to being sort of co-opted by other creators who saw it, like in the series Kingdom Come, where like Kingdom Come, the story, like it involves like a Twilight of the gods of like the superheroes, and some of the visuals feel like they're references to Alan Moore's pitch, but then like the sort of the tone of it and the just the way the story plays out is very different. Like Alan Moore himself has used like bits and pieces from this in like various works he did afterwards. You know, a big thing that he continually references in his superhero work is about how this stuff is all like all the superheroes are just, you know, derivatives of the pulp things, of the pulp comics, you know, of the pulp stories. Like Doc Savage, his base was called the Fortress of Solitude. You know, the Shadow, all these guys owe, like all these superheroes, Batman, Superman, all of them owe to those three characters, and then he for whatever reason he included Batman among them.
Speaking of, we were talking about unproduced screenplays. This in an unproduced work here. We mentioned Shane Black. We were talking about Shadow Company. I'm pretty sure there's an unproduced. He has a Doc Savage script.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Doc Savage. Doc Savage is like all of those characters. Doc Savage, Tarzan, and the Shadow. They like are so close to being like completely forgotten. You know what I mean? But of those three, Doc Savage by far. Like it's like, you know, hardcore fans of like comics history and fans of the pulps. They know Doc Savage, but it's like, yeah, like no, like Doc Savage is just about, and like when we were kids, you know, and the Shadow was a little more of like an obscure character and stuff when we were kids, but like Tarzan was still hanging on. You know, there were still like, you know, there's like the Disney Tarzan and stuff, and you had like Greystoke,
the Casper Van Dien Tarzan.
Yeah, and there'd be like Tarzan TV. Like Tarzan's hanging in there, like he's like the most relevant of the three, but even Tarzan is like so tired. And like when I was a kid, Tarzan was like such an important character to me. Like I remember watching all those movies.
Oh yeah.
And all of it, the old like the Johnny Weissmuller stuff, and then Legend of Greystoke, the Legend of Tarzan, and then you know, like the Disney one. All this, like they were all so important, and it's kind of like not so much. Like I feel like Conan replaced Tarzan for me as like once I discovered Conan, it was like you didn't need Tarzan in it because it was like, oh, it's Tarzan, but he's got boots on and a sword, you know, and he's got like a necklace.
We should do a all Tarzan episode.
Yeah, because I was thinking about Tarzan recently and thinking about how like, and just the Tarzan, just how like I mean I got Tarzan hair, you know, like the Tarzan. The Tarzan. The Tarzan archetype, just like this, like, you know, wild man who just does what he wants to do, and so it's like yeah, it's this like very like it's this very appealing, and it feels like a very like you know, that like the spirit of Tarzan is in a lot of stuff that's like around now.
Definitely,
it's funny that like he gets so rarely like directly referenced.
Dude, I'm still on a Conan kick.
Yeah, me too. We'll do some more Conan stuff for sure.
Guess what? I was watching the Conan, Jason Momoa Conan.
Okay,
it's
yeah.
on Warner HBO Max. Looks like $1 million.
Yeah, I remember seeing that like when it like around when it first came out.
I didn't catch it in the theater.
There's I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it like, you know, on DVD. But there's the Jason Momoa Conan, and then kind of like around the same time, another Robert E. Howard character. There was a Solomon Kane movie.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, you'll have to check that. Like that'll be a good double feature. That'll be a good like Tarantino style, like at the New
Double
Beverly.
bill.
Yeah, double feature you can run.
The Conan 2011
and Solomon Kane. Do a triple feature: Tarzan, Conan, Solomon Kane.
Wow.
Solomon and Alan Moore has done some stuff with Solomon Kane too. He had a character called Deliverance Drew, who was like his Solomon Kane. It's Alan Moore before comics broke his heart. You know, talking about this, like, you know what's coming. You know, he's like giddy talking about like the possibility of video game based on this. How great, like especially like 1986. That would have been an NES game.
Wow,
you know,
holy
an NES, like the one good NES. You know, superhero licensed game.
Yeah.
You know, and or like a computer game, like one of the like one of those like Nobunaga's Ambition kind of like, you know, strategy kind of games.
Let's hope LJN doesn't get the license for his
yeah. And then talking about like, he talked about the badges, like buttons, you know, waiting for Twilight buttons and how you could promote it and stuff. Like he was he was ready to go. Like he would have just, I mean, he loved that stuff so much. Those like DC superheroes. I think he probably loved the DC superheroes more than the Marvel stuff. Like I think just for whatever, like, you know, it was like more his era. You know,
That just saddens me that like they broke his heart like that.
they'll do it every time. They did it to Jack Kirby. They did it to Alan Moore. They did it to me. You know, like I faced my own version of what Jack Kirby, like a smaller scale version of what Jack Kirby and Alan Moore went through at DC. I went through my own version of that. So like I can attest. You know, not much has changed in 50 years.
Same shit, different day.
Yeah, exactly.
I love a good private detective.
Yeah.
Was that the question?
The question. Yeah. So like, the question like. That was like a Steve Ditko character, and yeah, you know, he's just kind of like the trench-coated detective, has like no face. He has this mask that gives him no face.
Awesome.
And he was, like from Watchmen, Rorschach from Watchmen was based on the question. He was kind of like Alan Moore's, you know, question stand-in. So like now he's got access to the real question.
That's so cool.
And when he was doing Watchmen, he was going to use the actual like Charlton characters that DC bought from Charlton when Charlton went under. So it included a lot of these Ditko characters, like the Question, and then Ditko's revamp of Blue Beetle, and Ditko's Captain Atom, and then a bunch of other characters. And Watchmen was going to be that. It was going to be like all those characters. But then when DC kind of heard what plans he had for like the horrible fates that these characters were going to have, they were like, okay, why don't, you know, he decided to like switch it over to just like sort of stand-in characters.
Yeah.
So like Captain Atom became Dr. Manhattan, and Blue Beetle became Night Owl, and so the question became Rorschach. But it's kind of like, okay, Watchmen comes out, it's the biggest thing since sliced bread. Now will you guys let me put your characters through the ringer? And he puts them through the ringer in a way that at the end, it's up to the reader to decide whether this is just poof, an imaginary story that gets, you know, negated by this sort of time travel paradox,
yeah,
or if it really is true. So like, you know, you
That's
have your cake
fun.
and eat it too.
The also there was that group of metallic characters.
The Metal Men, yeah. Again, he was just going down the list of like, you know, and again, like those characters probably meant more in the 80s, where it's like, you know, those sort of baby boomers who like grew up with this stuff in like the 50s and 60s were now like in their 20s and 30s, where now like a lot of these characters are just really, really irrelevant. And
it was interesting hearing these. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, it is kind of exciting. Yeah, hearing like what the Metal Men were they were like these robots and stuff. You know,
gold was going to get melted.
Gold
down.
was going to get melted down to make armor to sort of negate the powers of the Green Lantern, because Green Lantern, at least back then, was powerless against the color yellow. I don't think that's true anymore.
And then Batman, his like crew was trying to, were they like get rid of the people with superpowers?
Yeah, get them off the planet. Like again, it feels like there's like a political undertone to it of like, you know, think about what the word superpowers meant in the 80s. You know, get rid of the superpowers, get rid of these kind of like, get rid of the USSR, get rid of America, you know, get rid of Reagan, you know, like get rid of these sort of nuclear powers.
It was like, like there's like a rogue group of these guys like running around. I was like, what are these guys up to? Then there was Question, like he was out there like
investigating the mystery.
And then you got Joker like chopping like a log cabin out in the woods, like
in Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah. I guess like maybe
the altitude.
Maybe the House of Secrets could be this like giant log cabin.
That'd be cool.
It's like a log castle or something.
Yeah,
like almost like one of those forts you would see in like the French Indian War. Or something.
They got Joker's like by a campfire. Have you ever see him by a campfire?
Telling stories.
Yeah, the logs are painted purple and green and stuff.
And then there was the House of Mystery, which was kind of like all the magic characters.
Love those guys.
Kind of
I was able to ID him after we saw.
That's right. So Black Adam.
Black Adam. Yeah, like I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, there's Dr. Fate. Like, and again, Alan Moore's done stuff with that kind. Like none of this went to waste. Like I've seen echoes of these ideas show up in other stuff. It's just like how cool would it be to have it all in one place. And with the brand name characters, not with
That'd be awesome.
Like again, you do what you got to do. So you take your story and use your sort of knockoff characters, but it's so much fun when it's actually Superman or actually
Definitely.
the Demon or something.
Like, was it Hawkmen coming out of the sky?
It was Hawkmen, Green Lanterns, Martians, like Martian Manhunter guys and stuff. Like it was just
That
like
was
like
awesome.
armies of like every space. And they're Ranians, like characters from the armies from the planet Ran, which is the planet that Adam Strange goes to, and Thanagarians, which are the Hawkmen, and in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, he was doing like a storyline where Swamp Thing goes to Ran, the planet of Adam Strange, and kind of gets involved in like some like Cold War between Ran and Thanagar, and he said he was gonna kind of put that on hold in there and then bring it back, that storyline back, here in this. Again, like Alan Moore leaves DC not too long after that, so it's
I'm glad you were able to capture it in
put it in amber
and put it in
save
amber
it for posterity.
And
because Alan Moore's not good. He's not setting foot in. I think the only way we would get to see any of this stuff come to fruition would be if through some magical thing, some spell or some spell cast on the legal system, where somehow he ends up as like the owner of DC Comics or something. Like then we'd see that. But anything short of that, you're never seeing this.
the Total Recall show.
Oh yeah, through the magic of Total Recall. The other funny thing is like, because my wife was asking me like, well, do you think Alan Moore's going to see it? And like, first of all, he doesn't have a computer. He doesn't have the internet. He stays, and then if he did hear about it or know anything about it, he would just hate me. He'd hate you. He's put a magic curse on you, Matt.
Oh no, Alan Moore's.
Yeah, because that's the
my hair starts growing.
Damon Lindelof made that like incredible.
The HBO show.
Yeah, they made that incredible HBO Watchmen, which was so great, was like such a beautiful like addendum to Alan Moore's like this natural outgrowth to it, but it was its own thing and gave back as much as it took it. Like they made this really great HBO Watchmen miniseries, and Alan Moore wants nothing to do with go fuck yourself.
My
he's
God.
like he doesn't he's never seen it. He doesn't want to see it. He doesn't want to know about it.
So Alan Moore's placed a curse on us.
Yeah, he placed the curse. He placed a curse on the production of HBO's Watchmen, and he's placed a curse on the Total Recall show, which I think took effect long before we put this video up.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
it's like it was like a retroactive.
Retroactive curse. It definitely
Yeah, there's definitely some like monkey's paw stuff.
I was like, I was holding the hand. I saw it curl, the one finger curled on it.
You've been watching the Alan Moore Twilight of the Superheroes episode of the Total Recall Show. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And please follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow the show on Instagram at Total_Recall_show.
And check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Tom Scioli, and you can see various comics I've been working on. And I also put together like a PDF of a bunch of the drawings that were used in the Alan Moore Twilight of the Superheroes pitch.
It was great to see them be worked on live. That was awesome.
Yeah, you were there for some. Yeah, when we went to see Black Panther, I was kind of scrawling some of it when we were like waiting in the waiting area, having coffee.
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.